Hi, this is Rochelle with Live in Vibrancy, and today I'm talking about working with your own energy field. This video is going to be a little different than I had originally intended. It's come to my own awareness that I've been pretty in my own head after like blah 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 about not doing that, and yeah, it happens. Anyway, so I do maintain that assertion, especially now, with maybe a little more conviction than ever. There's definitely wisdom in your heart, and your head just has all the stories. And they're not really going to serve you to create what you want. And so while I do like to bring you content that prompts you to question the way that you see the world, because what you believe about the world and your ability to affect it is what really underpins everything. Creating is not about being all stuck in your brain, at least not creating things that aren't up there. And if you're anything like me, mine can go to a pretty dark place. Creating is a lot more about being and just becoming aware of who you're being. And that really means being embodied. And so I'm going to tie some of that into this content because it's relevant and because I was most definitely overthinking talking about embodiment and just bringing all the things and all the avenues. I definitely like to jump down a rabbit hole, just breaking it down to its finest points of minutia. But none of that is really clear and none of it's necessary. So I now see that for my own future, that there are signposts of when I'm in my head. My content gets really heady and it's filled with citations. Sort of like when you can tell someone has a cold because their nose is runny. So anyway, yeah. So if you want an indicator in your own life, the first thing would be to look, if you're second guessing and overthinking, you're in your head and you're limiting yourself. So embodiment, it isn't analyzing, it's about being in your body, right? It's not about analyzing the sensations that are coming up in your body, but actually experiencing them. It's analyzing them is what you do when you're in your head. When you're embodied, you experience the feeling and you move them through. You're able to observe the stories that are going to take you in the opposite direction of what it is that you want to create in your life instead of identifying with the stories. And so you can move easily between states when you're embodied because essentially it's your stories that and all the sensations attached to them that really make up your sense of self. They make up your identity. And so being in your head, it's like trying to drive a car while hanging out of the sunroof. You might have the best of intentions, but there's a good chance you're going to end up in the ditch. So embodiment means being a lot more present than you probably are on the average day. I know that when I'm embodied, I'm consciously present. But as my life kicks up, and sometimes the caveat is that's an unconscious pattern that I have, and I'm going to talk about like your unconscious patterns and why they come up, etc. In the following video. But I know that as my life kicks up, that I'm then being run more by my unconscious, right? And so my unconscious is only going to continue to create what it has created in the past. So you want to begin to recognize that once you're thinking about your emotional experience, you get to keep it. So instead, you want to be moving that energy through you. It's when you start telling the story about why you're experiencing something or the story about the sensations that actually begin to start to layer onto your identity. And interestingly enough, it's actually the story that we tell about an emotion or we tell about why we're experiencing it that actually adds the pain, because your body's built to experience these sensations, and when you learn to just process them and get the mind out of the way, there's actually not the level of pain that we're always in resistance to. We're always wanting not to experience this thing, but when we actually experience it, if you can do that without the mind chatter, then then you don't get that level of resistance. Anyway. And I kind of wanted to start with that because although I'm talking about working with your energy, this is a really important part about working with your energy. Your body is essentially an energy system. It's part of and within a greater energy system, just like your heart is part of you and within you, right? So your body, we could think of it, so I'm going to use some metaphors from like actual physics, like classical physics. Most people talk about like quantum physics, but I think this will be useful. And again, these are metaphors. So, sorry. Anyway, so think of your body like a thermodynamic system. It's meant to operate as an open system, open to the surroundings, allowing the energy to cross the boundaries in both directions and to literally flow through you. You're always taking on other people's energies. You're expressing energy. Your thoughts are energy. And you're supposed to be able to ground in and just let it move through you. But when the system operates as an open system, I can talk. I can't make a video without stuttering. So if I do, then you know someone else is taking over my body. Anyway, when the system operates as an open system, it doesn't overload and shut down. And when you experience a free flow of your emotions, you can do that without so much resistance. But from an early age, a lot of us have experiences that teach us to close off. Whether we're raised in an environment that's painful, and we close off to protect ourselves, or we're told things like we're too much, we're too loud, we're too sensitive. And then we begin to really learn to close off our natural selves and to associate our dense emotions as bad. And we begin to close them off as well. And then your body's thermodynamic system begins to operate as a closed system. And in that closed system, now you're storing all the dense energy that you've taken on through your life in your body. And with each of those emotional experiences, you've tied a story about you and why it happened, or what it means about you, or what it has become for you. And so what happens is now you're recycling what's there. And if you're storing a lot of heavy emotions like shame or grief or guilt, etc., those emotions, because they're heavy, they become the predominant energy that taints all of your experiences in some form or another. And so David Hawkins actually ran like 250,000 tests. It was a lot anyway. And from that, he was using, he was calibrating human emotions, and he was using kinesiology, and he basically created the Hawkins scale. I don't like copyright infringement, so I'm not going to pull it up on the screen, but you can actually Google that. So his work determined that these denser emotions actually weaken your overall energy field. I mean, this is actually really in line with the way energy is seen to move out of your field and into the body by people who sense energy. So Donna Eden talks about how when people worry, she actually sees their energy begin to contract and move into the body. And memories are actually anchored into the body by these dense emotions and stored there. And then these memories, they don't come up the way you might remember something. Usually they're going to just come up as a reaction, some sort of trigger. So anyway, so the Hawkins scale and the way Donna Eden talks about seeing energy move is actually also really consistent with what we know about physiology. That basically, once the fight or flight is triggered, the body's blood and energy leave the brain and fill the body. And this is to prepare you for fight or flight, right? If you're going to run away from a bear, you probably don't need the same level of blood in your brain that you would if you were going to, say, take a calculus exam. And so you can actually muscle test to confirm this, or you can find them on YouTube if you don't want to create your own dowsing rods and test this yourself. But we can see that using dowsing rods, that people's energy lines expand and contract. with the level of their thinking. And this is why once we've stored this energy in our body and it's basically triggered from external circumstances that we may or may not be aware of because it's done by the subconscious, it then triggers a thought, and it's the thought that keeps it going. And so basically, your energy, it just cycles in your life, and it's enmeshed with all these stories in your head about past experiences, especially when you're very much in your head. And the more you are in your head and not allowing this energy to move as an open system, it begins to become an isolated system. And often this is where we're essentially just shut down. And I've talked about this in some of my earliest videos. Basically, when you go into dorsal vagal shutdown, I can never remember the name of that, but basically the dorsal vagal nerve in the back shuts your nervous system down because it's in a constant state of fight or flight. You're feeling too much all the time, so it's essentially like tripping the breaker, and everything just shuts down. And then what happens is that now you just have all this dense energy, and your energy field is contracted, and you essentially cycle a lot more fear and worry and anxiety, and it just sort of keeps going because in an isolated system, it's not getting in, it's not getting out, nothing is affecting it. It's essentially, you've got it in a container within you, essentially. And the more negative emotion you're willing to feel, the more positive emotion you can access, because they essentially run on the same channels. So if you shut down your access to your negative emotions, then you also shut down your access to your positive emotions. And so I talk about this for a few reasons. One of them being there's a bit of a misconception that when we want to move into a state that we just have to repress the negative ones or get rid of them. And we don't want to be doing that because that essentially begins to take an open system to a closed system to then become an isolated system. And this is where often there's a lot of repressed emotions when people become, when they kind of can be reactive. And this is because essentially emotions are energy in motion. And what happens when you take energy and you begin to compress it and compress it and compress it, you create a bomb. And so basically, what I'm trying to get to is that one of the most powerful things that you are going to do to not only expand your vibration, but to allow you to come into the state to receive something or to create it or to not uncreate it, is to allow your emotional experience to happen. And again, you want to begin to practice allowing that to happen while you are not essentially retelling the story, because that re-traumatizes yourself each time that you do that. And that essentially just reinforces whatever subconscious belief that you have created in that emotional experience. So basically, I say none of this with judgment because there was a time in my life I really learned to, as a protection behavior, to really just shut myself off and with pure intention disassociate from my emotional experience. I could see John Dunbar's wolf get shot in Dances with Wolves and just shift into having the compassionate experience of a mall mannequin. And so sometimes that can be my unconscious protection mechanism. And so that's something when you start to do this work to just be aware of that may happen. And we're all human beings and we just learn from mistakes. So when it happens, just learn from it. Anyway, so basically, when you decide that you want to no longer operate as a closed system or as an isolated system, And you want to begin to allow yourself to expand your energy field, and essentially you begin to raise up on the scale of vibration. This is basically what they're talking about when they say the scale of vibration. These measured calibrations that David Hawkins established. So anyway, one thing that can really help support you do this is to begin working with your physical energy to move the energy through the body. And so while no yoga and such isn't really going to change your identity, it is going to actually help support you do that. So whether it's like Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, Donna Eden has movement exercise, like movements that she does in her energy medicine. Sue Morter's practice is based on this idea of that moving energy through the body actually allows you to move out of stuck places. When people want to manifest something in their lives, often something as simple as allowing the energy to start moving in your body, breaking up your habits, will allow certain things to come in, unless essentially you have like a psychological energy stuckness. That's the technical term. Anyway, so you want to, when you begin to do this, you want to also consider incorporating movement, particularly like when you start to feel sluggish and tired, that can be an indication of stuck energy. And there are physical movements that you can do that will begin to move that through the body. Because actually, energy, it runs in like meridians and channels throughout your entire body. And it, oddly enough, gets stuck in like the certain parts, particularly where there's like a bend. Which sounds crazy, I know, but if you really begin to look into this, you're going to find that that is actually legitimate. And when you start to feel sluggish, simply doing something like moving your arms up and down will allow that energy to move. Like there's a specific movement, but even just doing something like that allows the energy to begin to move through your body, and you can actually, instead of drinking a cup of coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can actually cause your own energy to pick up. And so these are ways that you can really begin to work with your own energy system, particularly if you want to be manifesting something and you seem really stuck. I suggest also incorporating ways to move the energy through your body. And as I mentioned earlier, you're part of a greater energetic system. And so there's an energy cycle between you and the system. You literally take in energy from above and below. You get energy from the sun and the water. And in fact, sun and water together create something, they actually create a state of water that it puts water into its fourth phase. So we generally know about the standard 3 phases, liquid, solid, vapor. The fourth phase is known as exclusion zone water, or EZ if you're Canadian like me. And so the exclusion zone, it's responsible for like those wild things you see in fluid dynamics, right? Like you can fill a glass and it will have a skin over the top. That's exclusion zone. And what happens is when light and water come together, the light actually affects the water molecules and causes them to structure themselves in a way that creates sort of like a viscosity to the water, but only like the outer layer of water, not the layer. So in an entire glass, it's only the outer layer that becomes this exclusion zone water. And so why do I tell you this? Because human bodies actually, exclusion zone water, it's like a battery pack. It actually transfers, because not only does it create exclusion zone water create viscosity, it actually also begins to carry a charge. And so it then transfers the energy of that charge to the mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of the cells. And so light and water literally become a battery in your body. And so in addition, you also exchange energy from the Earth in form of free electrons left by thunderstorm activity. And so the theory behind this is earthing, where essentially you will put your bare feet on some sort of natural earth. So not really concrete, but grass, dirt, or, whatever. And so earthing allows this exchange of these free electrons, and it's actually shown it can support a lot of your body's processes. Because you are literally a system within a system. And so just like the Earth has an electromagnetic field, every atom in existence has an electromagnetic field. You are made of atoms. You also have an electromagnetic field. And this is essentially part of the process through which you manifest things. Your thoughts have an electrical charge, and your emotions are essentially your magnetic field, as I discussed before in terms of how certain thoughts will affect what you are drawing to you based on your field. Anyway, so when your thoughts and emotions are in alignment, you're going to draw whatever that is to you. But being that if your thoughts are in one area, but your emotions you're experiencing really dense emotions, like right now when my cats are trying to kill one another, you are going to draw in what's more in alignment with your magnetic field. And so essentially this magnetic field, this is basically your aura. And if you want to see what that looks like, you can Google Kirlian photography, and it's going to show that there are colorful fields around everything, whether it's alive or inanimate, essentially because all atoms have a magnetic field. And so people's auric fields actually mingle and coalesce. This is also part of the reason our nervous systems go into resonance. And this is also how people become entangled. And I talked about that in a video I did quite a while ago, and I will put it in the comments. Or not the comments, in the description. So your auric field, it's not an egg shape around your body. It's actually a torus shape. And so it has a single axis down the center, and your chakras system run up and down this axis. And it has two vortices. So it's like a donut, or what I think is really cool, a wormhole in space. Anyway, so as we know from Ampere's law, a coil shape has a greater magnetic field than a straight current. And so an electromagnetic coil is made of material based on its magnetic permeability, which indicates how easily it aligns itself to a magnetic field. And so now if we take this back to the beginning, your emotions affect your magnetic field. When your emotional energy is operating in a closed or isolated system, your permeability is low. So energy is not crossing the perimeter. This means starting to let the energy be there so that it can move, or you can transmute it. And so while this video is filled with all sorts of tips and what to do's, I really want to end it by reconfirming that it's the state that manifests your life. And these things are just to support you on the physical level so that you can expand on the energetic or soul level, or whatever it is you like to call that. Because it's your state of being, not your state of doing, that creates your life. Two people can take the same action and not get the same result. Your current state of being is tied to your current identity. Your identity is made up of what you think and feel about yourself. And that is constructed from all the stories you tell yourself again and again about your life experiences, particularly the most emotionally intense experiences. I personally just came face to face with one of my more disempowering ones. So you want to begin to change that identity. It means being really willing to look at those and to really just meet them where they are. And this work is messy because they're often not in a happy place. And then you need to be able to let them go. The mind likes to keep you in the boundaries of your current self-image because that is known and safe. But it's that part of your identity that triggers the fearful thoughts and the subsequent behaviors anytime you cross into a territory that's outside of the borders of that identity. And it's those thought patterns that you just can't seem to change and are sometimes so identified with that you don't even see them, that are connected to that identity. But you came to this life to learn to transmute and manipulate energy to create what it is that you want. And everything is a reflection of within. So it starts with the energy within. And it means that you no longer make choices as a way to avoid that feeling or to create from that dense energy. It means that you expand your consciousness because you can't think higher than you feel. So transmuting dense energy naturally expands your consciousness. And the truth is the moment that you decide that you can have it, and the only doing is to release the misconceptions that you can't, is the moment that it becomes yours. And this is a banal platitude until you decide to actually embody this work. And so I hope that some of this is useful, and that if nothing else, you go get yourself a copy of David Hawkins' Letting Go and begin to let go of all the misconceptions you have in your life. Because I promise you, they're not going to create the life that you want. They essentially are the version of you that has the life that you have now. And so if you want to be able to begin to identify the aspects of your identity that are standing in the way from you creating what it is that you want, I have put a link to a worksheet in the description, and it's going to ask you some questions that are going to begin to help you see some of the ways that you may be showing up in your life that are stopping you from creating what it is that you want. So until the next time, live like you can't fail.